Welcome back to our class on Basar B'chalav. We are going to go over all the laws we have learned in Siman Pei Tes Aleph and Beis. We are in Yoreh, chapter 89, halacha 1 and 2, going over the waiting period between meat and milk. So we're going to go over the halachas that we've learned in Aleph and Beis in terms of when we eat these two foods, is there a waiting period after them before eating the opposite kind or not? So from Sif Aleph, we learn that someone who eats meat, whether that meat is from beef, which are a Torah prohibited animal, a chaya, which is things like venison, that are things like deer and so on, as are rabbinically prohibited, and oaf, which is a type of fowl like chicken or turkey, which are also rabbinically prohibited. You may not have any dairy products after them until you have waited 6 hours. What are those hours? So the hours are measured based on time on the clock, which is 60 minutes of hours, and that time doesn't change between summer and winter. And the time of waiting is going to begin from the end of eating the meat until you say benching, okay? And it doesn't start from the time of benching. And if you go ahead and chew for a child, even though you haven't swallowed it, we also require you to wait 6 hours. The Ashkenazi custom is that if there's a real need, one may rely on the Ramah, and one may eat cheese after 1 hour of waiting. They do have to do rinsing and washing of their mouth and hands. If you're still in the middle of the same meal, even though you have waited your 6 hours, one may not go ahead and begin eating dairy until they have said Birkas HaMazon, or whatever bracha achrona would be required at the time. But if they've gone 24 hours, they can go ahead and eat dairy, even if they haven't said a bracha achrona, so like they're just eating all day. We didn't really touch on that. That's just an actually interesting halacha mentioned in the Knesset Gedolah. If you're not sure if 6 hours have passed, we brought down a machlokas poskim about it, and we saw that one may go ahead and be lenient in those cases. So therefore, if you're not sure, you can go ahead and be lenient. And we mentioned that as long as it feels like it's been at least 5 hours, you can be lenient. We also said that if you still have meat in between your teeth after the 6 hours, you should remove it and rinse out your mouth. A person who doesn't feel well, who he has some type of either dangerous illness he has some type of a non-dangerous illness, or a woman who just given birth, or a child, if waiting full 6 hours is difficult for them, there are people who allow them to wait less than that, and possibly only 1 hour for Ashkenazim. For Sfardim, you may have to do either a 3 or 4 hour one. I mentioned that from Rabbi Ovadia, it's harder to rely on that. But if you're not ill, many poskim agree that you can go ahead and be lenient on that. Okay, so amongst the Sfardims, it's not clear, but it seems like you could be. So you can go ahead and do this for less than an hour for Ashkenazim for sure. Just going back about timing, so we mentioned that if you have a different minhag than the 6 full hours mentioned, you may rely on that. If you have one of the 5 hour ones, which is 5 hours and a little bit, or 5.5 hours, those are all legit ones to pick if you want to just pick one. And if you have a family custom for the 3 or the 4 hours that are mentioned in the poskim, you may continue doing that, but quote unquote picking it wouldn't be appropriate unless you have a specific custom, or you've joined a community where that is the common custom. And the last little thing over here is to say that if you have dentures, so the poskim write that dentures may be used for both meat and for dairy, and you can use them all day. And you do have to do the normal waiting period, even though they're not your real teeth. Okay, so you can't just be saying like, oh, well, it's not stuck in my real teeth, it's like my fake teeth, right? And you should try to still clean them out in between meat and milk. And but however, there's no reason to switch them out between That not only between dairy and meat, but also even for Pesach. And so therefore one can go ahead and use dentures all the time, but some people like to be strict on stuff because why not? Okay, that's all that comes from Sif Aleph. And Sif Beis, okay, we talked about waiting between dairy and then having meat. So the Iker Din of the Gemara is you have no requirement to wait between eating meat after dairy, and that's what's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch. The Zohar is one place where they talk about waiting the hour, and that source was also mentioned in our longer video about that's the source for the 1 hour for the Ramah as well, potentially. So many people say that there's a stringency for this waiting period when the cheese is aged, and you have to wait 6 hours based on what we saw in the poskim. However, the Ramah brings down that you would only have to wait an hour, but some people interpret the Ramah as saying you have to wait 6 hours. Someone who says that's a machlokas shach and taz, and is also later poskim after that. One who wishes to eat meat after having had cheese, he has to go ahead and rinse out his mouth, which means chewing on a food like bread, and also to put some liquid in there as well. And we say that you should have one and then the other, but not both of them together. The Mechaber brings down that there's the stringency is only by beef and venison, and not by fowl. However, many people have written that our custom nowadays is to do it all the time without any distinction. And this is also echoed in the Ramah as well. So whether you're Sephardi, Ashkenazi, this rule seems to apply across the board. And also we point out that there's reason to be lenient when you're eating it on plates and using forks and utensils, that these requirements for washing may not be required. So the Taz brings down that very wormy cheeses stay in the stomach for a long time, and that's why you have to wait 6 hours. So that many people point out this is only if you aged it for 6 months, okay, but not if it's been aged and produced by a mechanical process or sped up in a mechanical process. Okay, so things like cheddar or Parmesan, there's no reason to wait. We pointed out in the longer shir that some kashrus organizations insist on waiting, so you can kind of make a pshara, which is to wait the hour and not have to wait the full 6. The Kaf HaChaim, we mentioned that if you're not sure if the cheese is considered aged or not, then you could be lenient, because again, there's some people who are lenient in these cases. You can rely on them, okay? And he also points out that you might even if you want to be lenient, you can also just rely on the 3-hour opinion. However, for the Ashkenazim, that 1 hour would suffice in that case. Let's say you were chewing cheese for a child. So we talked about that in the previous class, that there's no reason to be strict on that, okay? So but there is the Yad Yehuda is strict, but most people don't follow the Yad Yehuda strictures anyway. And also, if you only drank milk, you don't have to wash your hands at all, okay? So it's have an extra leniency for that. So thank you for following along in these halachos. We look forward to seeing you in our next set of halachos in Pei Tes, which will be Sifim Gimel and Daled, where we talk about waiting after cooking foods with meat or cooking foods with dairy.